Hi everyone, my name is Anaga and I will be conducting the tutorial session for the Chat App program. We will be using MIT App Inventor for this, so make sure you have everything set up and ready to follow along. So first you need to create a new app and label it Chat App, and as a preparatory precaution, I will not be teaching you how to create an account or create an app or things like that. I expect you to already have that knowledge. And just for fair warning, this might be at a pace that is easy for you to follow along at first, but since this is a video, you might want to pause whenever you need to catch up with something. So let's get started with that. Okay, so this is kind of just a little bit of an introduction to CloudDB and what it does and how this is going to be made useful in our chat app. So when creating the chat app, the goal that we have is to save the data not locally, but to the cloud. And this is kind of similar to TinyDB, but I'll get deeper into that a little bit later. And by the end of today's tutorial, you'll be able to build a simple app that uses the CloudDB component and stores data to the cloud, also allowing multiple users of the app to communicate over multiple devices. So let's look at the example image that's going to be on the next slide to see what the app finish will look like. Okay. So the outcome of the app will probably look a little bit like this. And as you can see here, there are a few of the components we have, as well as a text box and a submit button, which we'll learn a little bit more about later. And this is also an example of the user interface. It's a little bit less complex than the ones that we had before. That should be okay. And the user has to enter their name in the chat and to start typing things in to whoever else is in the chat. And as you can see in the components bar, we use a label, a horizontal arrangement, a text box, a submit button, list view, and CloudDB1. Okay, so let's actually get started constructing everything on MIT App Inventor. So as you can see here, we just have a screen one. I expect you guys to have all of this set up already. All you need to do is open up an app, label it whatever you want, preferably what I have here, and just open up screen one. Don't rename it as anything else than what I already have. But you might want to pause here just to get everything set up. Okay, so the first thing we're probably going to do with this is make sure everything on the screen is completely centered. So the purpose of this is to make sure everything's not wonky. So there's like one thing on the right and one thing on the left, which can be like really inconvenient sometimes. So I'm going to do align horizontal as center and align vertical as center. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is search up a label in the component search bar. Okay, and what we want to put inside is enter your name to join the chat. Sorry, I put a colon there. Okay, that's pretty much all we're supposed to do, but the next thing we're going to do is search up horizontal arrangement. Now, we don't want the label to go inside the horizontal arrangement, so make sure we put that underneath when you're doing it on your screen. And we're also going to be making the width of this fill parent just so that everything's aligned, and even if it doesn't fit inside the little square that was originally there. And we also want to set its horizontal arrangement to center. This is for the same reason that we set the entire screen centered, so it doesn't look weird and wonky. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is search up text box in the component search bar. And this is actually going to be going inside the horizontal arrangement, just so that it looks a little bit nicer. And we're going to be putting the button on this side. But for this, we do want to make a few changes. So we're going to look up button next. Just put that to the right of the text box and make the value of it submit and rename it as submit button. You can change the color of it if you want. You can do it in your own time or just pause this video and do it. You might as well take some time to catch up anyways, but I'm just going to change the background color to maybe cyan. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, now one of the last visible components we're going to be using is list view. Now we're going to put this underneath the horizontal arrangement just so that it doesn't go apart with everything that was there before. Okay, so I want my background color to be white and I want the text color to be black. This is just for aesthetic purposes and it just makes everything look a little bit better and easier to see. We don't want to change the name of this, so please don't make any changes to that. Okay, so this is the last and final component for the user interface, and that is the one and only CloudDB. And as you can see here, it doesn't show up on the screen itself, but it does show up in the bottom as a non-visible component, and on the right here under the component slideshow. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this. So before moving on to the actual code for the app, I want to give a little bit of an overview of CloudDB. So as for what is CloudDB, it is essentially a non-visible component that allows you, in this case the programmer, to store data on an internet-connected database server. And this can be connected on different devices as opposed to TinyDB, which stores things locally, which essentially means that you need to be on that specific device to access certain data. So if I were to enter my phone number on an app that's TinyDB based with MIT App Inventor on my cell phone, but I went on my computer and tried to see the phone number that I stored, I wouldn't be able to see it just because it's stored locally on my cell phone. But with cloud, if I use CloudDB, then I would be able to access it on my computer as well. Okay, so let's go back to MIT App Inventor and go to the blocks section. Okay, so personally, I think that you guys should pause here as well, just to get a little bit of an idea of how the user interface looks. And I also want you guys to kind of reflect on what you think the code would do based on the information you have already. But if you don't want to do that, let's just go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is initialize 3 variables, and these variables are called username, joined, and chat list. So the username is basically whatever name the user enters in from the UI. If you saw the question that asked them to enter their names to join the chat, and joined is a Boolean that ends up being true once the user logs in. And chat list basically stores all the chat messages in a list so you can refer back to them whenever necessary. So these are global variables. I'm just going to get one of these and Control-C. Okay. Call this username. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so that's pretty much how it should look right now, but I'm going to be adding little corresponding blocks to the end. And I'm going to be making joined false for now, but we're going to change it back to true if the user actually enters something into their little text box. And then chat list is going to be an empty list. Okay, so those are the 3 things complete that you should have right now, but let's move on to when submit button.click. So if you remember from the user interface, there is this submit button that we have right next to the text box that the user can click when they're done entering things in. So our next piece of code is going to determine what's going to happen when the user clicks that. So when submit button.click, we want to put an if then else statement. And we're going to attach this to the not block, and we're actually going to get a get join blocked as well. Okay, so I just have these two blocks out right now, but I'm going to be arranging it. And then what we want to do is put in another if then statement within the if then statement that we just put. It's kind of confusing, but you should understand how it all flows together in a little bit of time. So the first thing we want to do is determine whether the user actually joined or not. So if you remember, that was the little Boolean that we'd created earlier, and we want to use a not, which should be in logic. Okay, so we're going to say if not, get global joined, and if it is not empty, then we want to do a few lines of code. So let's take the not again. And actually for this instance, we want to get this. And then the last text should be textbox1.text. So this is basically the first part of the code that we want to know whether the text box 1, which is this little text box here, is empty or not, and if the user is just, clicking random buttons. I don't know, you never know what they might be doing, but yeah, so if that happens and if it's not empty, then we want to set the global username to whatever the user put in. So let's go back to username. Set, and then we're going to do global username to this. And then the next piece of code that we want to put in is set global join to true, because we know that the user has joined and it's successful and everything's pretty much successful. So that's what I'm going to do next. And the last and final thing in this piece is to set label1.text to type in your message and press submit to send it. So if you remember, label1 is just this little thing that I put here, but after the user clicks submit and everything's verified and we know that they actually put something in, we want to give them a new instruction just so that they know that they can start typing messages as if it's in a chat. So let me go to label1. I'm going to say set label1.text to, and then I'm going to get a little text thing. And the message is kind of long, but you guys can pretty much say whatever you want as long as it says something along these lines. So type in a message and press submit to send it to your friends. Okay. And the next thing is the else statement. So to figure this out a little bit, we kind of want to know why the user hasn't put anything in yet, but we're going to call CloudDB1, and this is a pretty unique thing, and it's pretty special because this is your first time probably. So make sure you are aware of what's going on. So I'm going to go to the CloudDB1 variable that I have. And I'm going to get the one that says CloudDB1 dot append value to list. I'm going to put this here. And this is basically going to add whatever the user types to the list. And the tag is going to be chat. Oh, sorry, tag. Okay. And then the item to add is whatever the user put as their username. So I'm going to get a join. And in the join, the first one's going to have get global username. And the second one's going to have a colon. And the last one is going to have a text box.text. Let me just add one more in. Okay. So copy, paste. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the if then else statement, but underneath that we want one more thing. So we want to clear the text box just so that the user doesn't constantly have to see their name. So let's go to text box 1 and we're going to set text box 1 dot text, and then we're going to make that an empty string. Okay, so that's pretty much the first little block of code we have here. Feel free to pause on the screen if you still have to copy down a few stuff. Okay, so the next little block of code we're going to use is when screen1.initialize. So this is basically just setting up things whenever the user opens up the app, closes the app, etc., etc. So we're going to go to control. And we're going to say, actually, I'm going to go to screen 1 and we're going to say when screen1.initialize. And for that, we're just going to completely create a whole new list so that the user can start a whole new chat. So we're going to call CloudDB1.getValue. Okay, so the tag we use is chat, if you remember that from earlier. And the value, if the tag is not actually there, is just a whole new list. Okay, so now we're going to do our second CloudDB piece of code. And the purpose of this is essentially to use the callback event CloudDB1.getValue that is triggered when CloudDB responds to getValue. And the first thing that we're going to do is check whether the tag is correct, chat, and we're going to use an if-then block for that. And if the tag is the correct one, we're going to be saving the value, which should be the list of messages, into the global variable chat list. And then we're going to set list view 1.element to the list of messages, so they will be displayed in the list view. Okay. I'm going to put an if-then statement inside my CloudDB1.getValue, but first I need to get it. Okay. Make this a bit bigger. There we go. So as I said earlier, the first thing we're going to do is check whether the tag is the correct one. So we're going to go to global variables and we're going to say get tag. And actually, I'm going to need to use a logic for this. Okay, there we go. So if get tag is equal to chat, and we're going to use the string for that and create chat. And then the then statement would essentially set global chat list to whatever value the user put in before, and set list view.element to global chat list. Okay, so for get value and get global chat list. So that's pretty much it for the second little CloudDB1 blockchain. So feel free to pause here if you want to, but we're moving on to our last little bit of code. And for this, I'm going to use CloudDB1 dot data change. So this is just going to start a series of events that occur after the data in CloudDB1 changes. So as an explanation, this event is triggered whenever anyone uses the app updated CloudDB. So it's basically triggered whenever any new message by anyone is sent. So this block should essentially do the same thing as a got value block. So you can right click and duplicate the inner blocks from got value and snap them into data change. So that's pretty convenient. Okay, so I'm gonna get all of this, I'm gonna put it in there. And that's pretty much it actually. And feel free to test it out on a device or on your emulator. And I hope you guys all had a really good time learning how to make a chat app. And I look forward to teaching more tutorials soon. Bye.